Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Oscilloscope with the first of the deep dive recordings. So something a bit new. In these deep dive ones, we're going to be doing exactly as that was just playing one piece of music and chatting with the artist as an extended interview about how and why they did what they did and taking some time to unpick what's going on. I'm Dr. Ed Wright, and for the first of these meanderings, we are joined by Mr. Benjamin Buck, aka the Reverend Tate, aka half of host operator, who may well be familiar to some of you who've been following this before. So, Ben, welcome. Thank you very much for coming back. Great.
Oh, thanks, Ed. I mean, what a privilege to do the first deep dive. I really want to thank you and all the team for giving me that. I'm very excited. So excited I went and made a brand new piece. So how exciting it is that, I'm very, very interested in. And then in future episodes, I'll be coming back and co-hosting with you as well. So
yeah,
we're going to take a real good look at new works, existing works of artists. And I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you. So for those of you who might have come across some of this before, I mean, our normal Oscilloscope events are basically the last Tuesday of each month, whereby we have people doing experimental electronic music and we have people playing their pieces and talking about them. And since sort of COVID and lockdowns and all those things, we're now sort of fully online and not quite the same interaction, but we're basically carrying on. And one of the cool things is people talking about their works and explaining and getting into that. And this is basically a sort of longer form version of that, because as we all get with the internet, people tend to get impatient or things are paced differently to what they might be in the real world. So this gives us a bit of a chance to take those things that we thought, actually, that'd be really quite cool to expand on that and to have a place to be able to do that. So yeah, here we are. It should be quite good fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully this will be the first of several of these, which we'll try and put out on the 15th of each month. So if you're watching this in the real world at real time, this is pre-recorded, but no doubt if you want to stick stuff in the comments, then Ben or I might get back to it at some point as and when we notice. But definitely around the time of it going out, we're going to try and make sure that we're there and can see a bit. So yeah, a brand new piece from you, a brand new, in fact.
Brand new, hot off the press as of yesterday. I think you got it this morning, probably at like 7 a.m. or something, to take a look at it.
I actually got it this morning. The message came through on Messenger at 3:15 a.m. UK time. I happened to wake up at, I think, something like 3:16 and saw there was something there and went, oh, what's that? And then promptly rolled over and went back to sleep again.
That's very wise.
Which I apologise. But suffice to say that by 7:30, I'd had a listen prior to my first cup of tea. So that was, that was as an experience, you sort of, it's a brand new cool thing. What is it? I mean,
that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing. We could just, what happens when you view sound art at 3:15 in the morning? That's a whole, something to explore in its own accord.
Yeah, I should also say that you are in Canada and I'm over here in Wales, which explains some of the time difference before people get too confused. But it sounds like that was still a bit of a long, drawn-out process for you.
It was, and I'm very happy with how it came together, and especially making it. I did it over the 4 days, so very very condensed process to make it. But it's probably been 12 months of conceptual work to get to the 4 days to make it. So in a way, it was kind of easy, but time to do it, to go through the motions is what took a while, because of all the time I put in conceptually beforehand. I'd almost go as far as just to say, but I don't want to watch it first. It's almost autobiographical. It brings in so many elements of my practice, and I'll share those things. And
that's
after we
really
watched it.
cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean that's the vibe that I got looking at it, and sort of knowing bits and different facets of your work and what you do and what you find interesting. It was something that very much struck me as, this is absolutely you and your kind of aesthetic decisions. And that was something that, Charles, who is teching for us today, picked up on as well. And had a sort of bit of to and fro with messages at relatively sensible UK o'clock going, oh, yes, this.
I was sleeping then.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we actually have a look at the piece then before we kind of steal all its thunder and let the good people of internet land have a watch?
I agree. I'm ready.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Let's do it.
It's already started twitching.
Yeah.
If you're out there, please have a listen. This is a new piece by Benjamin Buck entitled Place Item Here. If you're listening on little tiny speakers or on your mobile or whatever, please do take a moment to get a decent pair of headphones or a decent set of speakers. A lot of this is in quite some extremes of the range. There's some bassy bits and some really trebly bits that really help. That actually, I found from repeated listens through the day, it really does bring out a lot more detail. So if you have the chance, please do. If not, then don't worry. And again, you can come back and listen to this again. But without further ado, I guess, Benjamin Buck and Place Item Here. Congratulations, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for making that piece and sharing it with us.
Yeah, well, it's all out of the love of the deep dive premiere. To be honest, if it didn't have this platform, I don't know if I'd make this piece. So I think they go hand in hand. To be honest.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything you want to? I mean, that's probably the first time you've seen it with, I don't know, somebody else looking at it. Is there anything that springs to mind for you that you instantly kind of go, I've got to get this out, got to say this, or?
Yeah, I think if anyone, the first off entry point to understanding this piece from my point of view, because I prefer to have, subjective opinion, right? However, it's really autobiographical, like ridiculously meta. So a lot of the things you see are very intentional and make a great deal of reference just to me as a practicing artist. And so even down to the origin of my practice, which was in two-dimensional work, drawing and painting. And so I even managed to get that reference into the piece. So I do feel like it's very much, it's got a lot to offer about sound and music and composition as questions. At the same side, it's if you know my work, then you might understand it on another level as well.
Absolutely. That was something that sort of sprang, and that sort of looking deeper into things sprang to mind actually just today, like trying to absorb it quickly and get it to some sort of level where I could kind of hold a coherent discussion about it. And listening to it the first time, I was still half asleep and hadn't even had a cup of tea in the morning, and it really quite unsettling. And then listening back to it, sort of finding more and more things, and it's kind of more meditative and trance-like than actually I felt it like the first couple of times. So I mean, when you wrote this, I mean, how do you envisage people listening to and watching this? Is this something that's like a one-off piece that somebody comes to and consumes, or is this something that you imagine people having to work that bit harder and delve into and understand? Because I mean, I certainly got a lot more from it from repeated viewings and listening. So I'm just intrigued how you envisage people dealing with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I mean, I've been doing this sound work, I would say professionally for 8 years, and then before that even longer. And there's always the question of like, was it sound? Is it music? How much of it is? What does sound composition even mean? And I think for me, like, I hope that if you've never seen anything that I've ever done, you could come to this piece and enjoy it as a piece unto itself. It's self-contained. However, like I said before, like the more you know about me, the more you can catch little bits of Easter eggs. Like, for example, I have many pieces in the past that deal with circular narratives. I'm obsessed with circular narratives, and that's like that's the framework of this piece, visually and audio. The audio, everything is looped. Everything is just looping into itself, including the starting sort of image text that you sort of get to come back to at the very end when it comes back in as white words. And I think, definitely from my point of view, I hope you could just approach this as a piece of work and get something from it. If you want what I've done behind it, there's a lot more there. And, right away, you don't need to know who my work is if you take a little bit of a look. The first two drums we see, the first two little drum beats there, those are 100% authentic, ripped right off of the mic. There's a bit of noise reduction, but there's no messing around with those. So those are your authentic drum sounds. And then we move quickly away from that. And if you are astute with listening, you'll know that, for example, the singing Tibetan bowl, I mean, it just doesn't work like that. That like that third hit is so, and then the finger piano, I mean, like it's clearly altered. Like there's a backwards noise at the front. So as you move along, I've taken the authentic samples of those instruments and intentionally using all sort of acoustic-y or non-traditional electronic instruments. And I've taken those sounds and I've put them into an editor. In my case, I've used Ableton, and I've affected those. So you get to a point where I think it's, the first 5 have moved up, and we're introducing what I call more players. I see the beginning of that collection almost as an orchestral, like everyone's showing up to play and they're, getting their instruments ready. And when more of those players arrive, well, we've lost all authentic sound at that point. And if you're a student, you might hear that the hairdryer is actually the sound of an airplane. So we're already moved away from traditional sounding objects and then replacing those associated sounds with those objects anyway. To the point where we've moved right into, which my daughter, who's 6 years old, watched it with me, and she said, when we got to the banana, she goes, "What sound does a banana make, Dad?" And that's the point, right? It's like, oh crap! Why is that banana making sound? Like you've lost that authenticity now, and you've lost that connection that maybe you would have experienced with the first 2 drum samples. So there's a lot of that questioning of authenticity and sound associating the object, which is place item here, and what you hear, the viewer. So the documentation part of it all is embedded in there. But definitely, I'm fascinated with the authenticity of what you experience. And in this case, I'm very much playing with that right up until we get to the drums that come in, and those are completely digital, software fabricated rhythm section, and completely timed to the beat, like mathematically made, whereas the acoustic-y samples are completely all over the place for their length. And so you get this sort of because you get this sort of contrast, of the sort of acoustic-y, what you think is legit, to this digital, very structured rhythm. And my hope is, and maybe you can tell me if you felt that, is by the time you sort of understand the drums are coming in, you naturally kind of want to feel safe with them. You're like, oh, some rhythm section here, something that makes sense. Now, if you have a chance, if I could, I don't have it on me, but if you looked at the video software, editing software, it looks like it's been made by Lego. And that's the best way to describe how I compose sound, is that I've taken the samples and the bits, and I may have had them in a very logical order, and then I just rearranged them in a very chaotic order, and that creates the new composition. And that's the same with the acoustic sounds. Like, take a breath here, but to go back, when I first recorded this piece, there is an authentic loop recording of all the sounds that I made, so that I had timing when I put things under the camera.
Yeah.
So there is a sound piece off of those acoustic instruments that I heard as I filmed that doesn't exist anymore because it was never recorded. So that's your authentic sound piece. Doesn't exist. And it's the sort of same with the drums. When I made those drum or that rhythm section, it's there's a file with all of them there in a very pristine order, very rigid order that isn't available to hear. So the authentic works that this piece is comes from don't even exist anymore. So with my work, I love this question of what is authentic, what are you really listening to, what has been manufactured, how does the documentation of that object or that experience change the authenticity of the experience. And that's a mouthful, I realize. I think
I think you've almost successfully wiped out most of the questions I prepared. No, that's really cool. I mean, what intrigues me with you saying about the authenticity of that is that, weirdly, I almost found it more authentic as it opened up and I became engaged in this world, because I think there's a section around at the very start with the drums that I'm quite interested where you said it wasn't processed apart from a bit of denoising, because I actually heard there's a bit of squelch on, I think it's like second or third tap from the denoising, that when it stands out a mile as something that's processed, and you can see the fingers don't quite sync with it.
Yeah, that's true.
And that for me, that was just about close enough to feel like it should be right, but wasn't. I don't know if Charles has got that bit of video. If you don't mind just playing it for people that they can see.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the second drum. So there's got the
Possibly,
first
yeah.
drum.
I mean, might even be able to just play it from
the beginning. Yeah.
No, I think it's pretty much at the start, Charles. If you got it there, just run it from the start, and I can bounce up and down and go, "Oh, this bit."
I'm definitely interested to know where you think the little you hear the denoising is, because I got a story about that.
Yeah, it was just on
The second one.
Just on the back of the and it was you just almost hear it and pull back in, and this sort of weird sync with things not quite being right. Then once you kind of accepted that there was this strange world of different objects, actually almost felt more authentic to me. I don't know quite how or why, but it was.
Honestly, that's the intention, right? Is that like you've committed yourself to the disbelief. You've accepted that what you're experiencing is not authentic, even if it's subconscious. So you've accepted that, okay, something's not right here, but the brain's like, it's right enough.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting sort of point where it's like, okay, so, you know, at that point, like you say, and I consider, as I said, like the beginning, the sort of orchestral warming up, I think the first piece is after we've got all 20 objects on screen. And then it plays for a couple of minutes, like you said. And that's when you get the sort of jigsaw composition taking its sort of organic rolling form. And you do sort of end up with like a sound composition at that point, I feel like, once everything's shown up. And it's very comfortable. I kind of wanted it to be more jarring. And I think because I used a lot of our nice sounding, softer instruments, that ended up being a lot more trance than even I anticipated it. And it does, you do kind of get comfortable in there if you let yourself, you know.
Yeah, no, I was really quite shocked because, I mean, say when I first like tried to encounter it, it was literally the case of alarms gone off on the phone, stagger out of bed, go, oh yes, this came through in the night, quick press, put that on. And it was literally on little phone speakers, 3/4 of the way still asleep. And it was like, oh, this is really quite jarring. And yet coming back to it with a bit more caffeine in the bloodstream, sat on the computer, it took on a whole different element. But it's quite interesting that you're talking about things being jarring, because there's a lot of little, very subtle things that kind of come back. So, for instance, around sort of, what is it, 1 minute 20, 1 minute 18, where you've got the different frames of the images as the instruments kind of come together. Looks like they very obviously deliberately don't quite line up, sort of along the top edges. They're just fractionally out and kind of come into focus and those sorts of things.
By literally like a pixel, you know.
Yeah.
Subtle, that's
knowing the aesthetic that you're using and coming to it with, especially that opening, that to me suggests that was a deliberate thing. So I mean,
you got it, man. Absolutely, everything's deliberate.
What way? Why? I mean, what are you trying to invoke or to show with that?
Yeah, it's just exactly. It's all that, like, how astute are you? You know, are you rejecting this piece based on, you know, maybe not being familiar, or you know you can't engage? But if you're engaged in it, how much is there for you in there? And I left all kinds of like things like that to allude to, you know, things not being right, you know, things not being legitimate. And, you know, that grid being made by eye.
Absolutely fantastic. You just glitched on me. I don't know whether it did for everybody else, but literally at that very second, you went, things not being right, and then it just caught up with itself. I was like,
that's you know, the quality of the show. You know, it's such a quality show.
On our side, that's just absolutely brilliant. I like that.
Totally.
But sorry, yes, with the point you were making. Sorry, let's go back to that, because I was Getting
Here's
overexcited.
I'll give another like literal Easter egg. So if you I'll look at the intro to the egg item, you know, where I smack the egg down. Okay, if you're paying enough attention, you'll notice that that's actually the hand that's coming in to put the egg isn't putting anything. It's just a ripped version of the hand that smacks it, and that's intentional, and it's on just the one slide to give you that sense of what's that mean? Well, it's that whole what came first, the chicken or the egg? You know what I mean? It's like there's literally like there's what all the hands clearly bring out the object except one particular frame, and that's to give you the viewer that, oh, hey, there's a little message extra in there if I so wish to read into that. And they're all intentional. Every sort of little thing that you might catch and be like, is that meant to be, you know, a little bit different or a little bit tweaky? Yes, absolutely. Are all meant to give you that hint of which is the overarching sort of themes of my practice, which is what is real, what is authentic, and is it even possible to document something authentically? Which, of course, at this point, I would say no. And look, I'm just going to bring in now a clip I have from a performance I did with Charles Gershom. Charles and I have a project we call Host Operator.
Yep.
And this is a clip from a performance we did. It was called Clown. And
yes.
Yes. And I think what it does is that this is another example of a great example of us as performers being completely unauthentic, and then doubling up with the documentation you see also being completely unauthentic. And the point is that when for us, and at least for me in this particular piece, was there's no way we can capture this moment authentically. And if we do, it's not going to sound good and it's not going to look good. So what's the point of that documentation? Right? We're not a science operation here. We're not like looking for the legitimacy of the source. You know, we want actually to communicate the meaning of the work itself. So if we change the documentation to support the meaning of the work, then the fake documentation is more authentic than if someone just stood there and recorded it. So I think that Charles has a little clip. Yeah, the soundtrack is a total wrong. Hey, so I think that's a great example of how boring would that be if you saw what really happened. Literally, Charles pushing a big wooden container, and I was pressing one button. In the experience in the moment, if you were there on the promenade, of course, it would be we could get away with it. But as documentation, it failed.
So I remember running into you around somewhere outside Mostyn Gallery with it.
Yes.
At the time, and it's very different, but actually that is very evocative of what it was. So in a sense, that does provide more of a truth than the documentation potentially would.
Absolutely.
Which is really quite cool. I mean, it's one of those things that strikes me through that and through this, but there's something both incredibly in-depth and thoughtful and serious, but actually really quite playful about what's going on. You know, once you get through this quite sort of highfalutin dialogue that we all tend to sort of work in and talk about art with a capital A with, there's something really quite like, where there's this thing, and you can discover it a little. You feel better, or you'll have had some fun kind of engaging with doing this thing. And finding these little Easter eggs, as you mentioned, which is really quite cool, and I like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. No, and like I come from, look, my origins in sound art. Like I was lucky. I had my girlfriend had a brother who had 15 years on me, and he was influenced. He was influenced by like Mobius and all kinds of great sound works. And he's the one who turned me on as a young 15-year-old to this sort of thing. And I was lucky because sound work. If you're unfamiliar with it, it can be a little intimidating. There's a lot going on, especially if you're very musically inclined and you're just going to constantly say, "Where's the music? Where's the music?" When you can add a visual element to Soundworks, like we can do with Oscilloscope or Deep Dive, and we can choose visual elements. I've always tried to make those elements support the concept and support actually enjoying the sound work itself, because there's nothing I don't like artwork that isn't enjoyable. Some people do, and that's subjective. But for me, like, I want to find some fun in the things that I partake in, and sound art that can dabble in fun or even a bit of comedy with the old pen boing sound that would, like this. Just give a little bit, right? Like it doesn't always have to be capital AR. It doesn't always have to be 100% serious. And I hope that's why, coming back to, is it a standalone piece? Maybe. I hope so. I hope you can watch the whole piece and enjoy it on its own. Does it have a whole bunch of more to it? Yeah, for sure. If you go deeper into it, you can definitely find more stuff. There's I would like to talk about the way we get to the black dot part of the composition, and that sort of almost op art sort of moment there where, like if after a bit too much and staring at those black dots with the drum beat, I just started to get the old eye illusions there and stuff. And that's the sort of goes deeper into, that whole, like the mythological of it, the sort of like spectacle, sensationalized part of it as well. So I even tried to draw on something that's a very visual reference. Like op art is a very visual reference to visual art. And by pulling that into my piece and sticking it inside there, I hoped I could bring that visual element and make it fit with the sound element, and so I sort of hope that worked. And then, of course, when it comes back to the letters, you get that whole circular narrative thing. But with those, the reason I want to stay with those dots for a second and the 20 spaces that I chose. One, I chose 20 spaces because the composition of that is pleasing and also is referencing so many COVID Zoom stream. Everyone's now familiar with the multi-boxed format. So it's just right away you can digest that format. Second, and I got a bit of clip here that Charles is going to cue up. There was a piece of work Charles and I did called Banana Harmonics. And Banana Harmonics was us inviting unskilled or untrained people to all cooperatively play a piece live. And so the point of that was to sort of what I call sort of chaos composition. Where we said to these people, okay, I'm going to stand in the middle here, and I'm going to point at you, and you just do whatever. And somebody hit pots and pans, and somebody, this is a tradition that goes back since the 50s and 40s, and very awesome tradition of having multiple sources of sound that you aren't in charge of. You can put them somewhere, but you're not in charge of the source of those sounds. And having that sort of format of conducting chaos was what I wanted to bring over into this piece. So in a way, I treated all of those loops as separate performers, even though it was just the same loop. And so that, if Charles can play that clip, that's definitely Banana Harmonics is definitely a big influence into this piece as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
No.
So he's going to play a piece I did.
Sorry, go on.
He's going to play an animation I made. So it's not a live clip. It's back to the documentation. So it's an animation I made. It's a bit of fun. It's not so directly related, but why not play it? Because I love animating. I think it's the real reason. When he's ready.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, so I think you can tell right away, and Charles has the other clip he'll play in a second. You can sort of see right away that you've got the beats coming in at the end. You've got a harmonica playing no sounds that the harmonica would make. So already, and this is going back 6 years ago, we were starting to introduce these elements into that practice of disassociation. I think we got one more clip from that, which I think it sort of shows the live chaos compositions that we.
Hey!
So yeah, these are the sort of more personal things that you might not grab, obviously, when you see the piece. But there's definitely an origin to a lot of the elements that I put into that piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I've talked quite a bit.
Yeah, no. Okay, well, going back to the last sort of point and keeping things small, and then before going on to the big question, but you mentioned about the significance of the black dots and sort of op art thing, and it was one that popped up actually for me earlier, just watching it through just now, and I hadn't realised before, but is there any significance to the fact that this all sort of seems to sort of gradually wane like the moon across these dots as you gradually painted them in? Because I totally hadn't picked up on it before. And then it's probably got to be about the fourth or fifth time I've watched this today, and then all of a sudden gone, oh, that! As you were going off on one about the dots, I thought, is this going to come up? And it didn't. So, yeah, is there any significance to that, or is that just another hidden playful thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, like it works, doesn't it? And like
it does, I think, yeah, you get this real little crescent moon at the end, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think that okay. So yes, that was intentional because I had paper down in front of me so I filmed that with paper, right? And it was always the point to come in with the. So here's the part that I love, the authenticity part, which I didn't really edit out. Was actually I went through 3 markers because they just kept running out of ink. And I would cut out that switching, but there's 3 markers that I used there until eventually I was like, I got to go get paint. I wasn't even really going to use paint, and and to me that worked out so well because yes, it's intentional and it gave that nice crescent moon. It gave it the whole. I did intentionally try to finish it painterly, like to give you that sense of completion as a painter. So that sort of worked out, but the unintentional part of being able to on the fly grab the paint and stuff really goes back into that feeling of authenticity to me, where it's like, oh, okay, so this is like a real hands-on thing. You know, like he's literally drawing on the page now. How authentic is this? Like, you know, should I be still questioning what I'm watching right now? And I'm always sort of hoping that I'm teasing a little bit back into like, no, there's authenticity here. There's authenticity here, and there's also, you know, manufactured. There's also illusion, and you can find them. You know, that's the fun. That's almost the where's Waldo? It was like, where's the authenticity? And it's there. And so that worked out really, really well. Certainly, I had limited lighting, so you know, you get the advantageous sort of spotlight on the bottom corner. But all in all, it was intentional to make that look like a painterly moment, and just sort of pull you right out of where we were as like an audience of listening to something with visuals, to be like, oh no, this is a visual piece.
So I mean, sort of building from that, I mean, just clearly at the moment we're all pretty much stuck in here in this sort of Zoom-based world, as you put it earlier, with sort of boxes of 20 people that appear and disappear, and you don't recognise your friends unless they've got a 16:9 frame around their heads, sort of thing. But I mean, just that's something that's part of the necessity of the world at the minute, and obviously this is the way we're doing stuff and getting people to engage with pieces and things. But I mean, obviously you made a piece that is aware of that environment, but is this something that you feel it's sort of situated in as a permanent entity, or is this something that you feel is something that would have a life out in the real world, or is this a concert piece or a kind of gallery type thing? I'm intrigued as to kind of quite what you envisaged it as a thing to eventually be.
Yeah, no, certainly, like, it's intended to be a video. Like, you know, it's certainly, I've put equal stock into what you see as into what you hear. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that percentage. It's all what you want to make as an artist. So some people put 10% stock into their visuals and 90. That's totally fine. I tried to make it like a real 50-50 at least, so that the video element was. So yeah, of course, you know, I love the fact that democratization of media means you can watch it online at any point. But yeah, if it had the opportunity to be on a big screen with a big, beautiful sound system, I certainly wouldn't turn that down either.
There we are. If anyone out there with a big screen and a big, beautiful sound system's listening,
send us pictures, because I can't come visit, because of COVID. But I think you know, like, it's really important for me to mention my relationship with Charles and Host Operator before we get wrapping up here, because that was Charles and I have been working on that conceptual project for 8 years. It's still ongoing. And, you know, a lot of how this piece came out comes from the processes that him and I sort of started up together. And I think when it comes down to just briefly going back to that banana harmonics, if I was to make this a live thing, it would go back almost to that thing, which was always the goal for us. We just never got the funding to have an opportunity to chaotically compose live 20 random sources of sound, authentic or not. And just the opportunity to do that we just never had the chance to. So this is sort of my way of fulfilling that same sort of, you know, desire in a way, like you say, that I can do in my studio during COVID. You know, it's possible, right?
So I mean, it did feel very much. I mean, the vibe that I got from it, with this kind of curation of these things in their spaces, and it felt very much like the sort of thing you could expect to see as a video piece in a gallery, perhaps with those things on pedestals in the space as well. So I mean,
a good idea. I'll be using that.
Maybe that's
that's a very good idea.
Maybe there you are, and you find 20 random people to conduct. You never know.
I mean, you know, I think to me it's a successful piece. One, because like I feel like I got. Thank you. I feel like I got my message out. But two, it's like it can evolve. Like, I agree, it can evolve. You can have a visual. You can show that like in a space. the plinths and the objects, and it will take on another meaning. You know, you can take it live. You know, you could get all those objects and 20 rando people and go, here we go, let's perform this thing. You know, like and to me, like if it's truly autobiographical, it's going to have room to grow, because I'd hope that my own practice has room to grow. You know. Okay,
so I mean, what's really interesting that's come out of that is a lot of the things from your past that are feeding into that, and the loss of the kind of fine detail that is there for people to look at and to pick up on. I mean, is there an overriding kind of arch to the piece? I mean, there's clearly a structure. I mean, with the sort of boxes and the evolving and this sort of metrical thing that appears about 6 minutes through, and the painting of this stuff in. I mean, what is that wider narrative there? Because we've been so zoomed in on these little snippets that you can go, yeah, here's an example of this, here's that. Right. I mean, what was your overall kind of meta thing going on there, to steal a word from you?
Yeah, totally. And I think, again, I'm going to go right back to this space. Oscilloscope has been so influential since I've had access to it, because I'm in Canada, right? So digitally, yes, you've done it, Ed. So having Oscilloscope, having access to professional sound makers every month has been really influencing my own practice. And I think when I wanted to make this piece, it was a sort of response to that, and also a response to having the opportunity to deep dive. There's I have this chance now to show you the sort of overarching thing, which is that, can you, the audience, suspend your disbelief enough to sort of let the reinvention of what I'm telling you be enjoyable, you know? So if you can sit there and go, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that cymbals don't make those noises, but I am enjoying it.
Yeah.
So now I've reinvested, and I agree with you, Ben. The cymbals now do make those noises. So it's a bit of that. Like, overall, if the goal of the piece was like, can you join me? Can you engage in this with me? And if so, then there's all this, like we said, all this minute detail.
That's that's a really nice answer for that. Actually, that's sort of lovely to sort of consider. And you sort of talk about how this sits within sort of thoroughly autobiographical, and I mean, even from a sort of knowing you briefly, or relatively briefly, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that sort of links into that semi-minimalist sort of thing with the I can't remember the title of it, the clap step Steiner thing that came out in 16-bit glitch. That was kind of quite reminiscent of that in terms of its methodology and
totally
that sort of way of working. And to be honest, looking at this, I didn't quite pick up on the Zoom thing with the 20 boxes. I mean, the first thing that hit me with that was that's somebody who's spending most of the time, most days, dealing in graphic novels, and there are the different entities in their boxes on the screen, you know, and there's pretty much a speech bubble behind it, you know, which, whether that was deliberate or not, I don't know. But I mean, where do you see this sort of fitting within your own body of work? Is this sort of a culmination? Is this just a bridging point to something else? I mean, how do you feel it's going to function for you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like it's very much, you know, unlike the clap, which was an audio piece, this gives me, the video gives me the opportunity to inject those elements of my practice. So minimalism, absolutely big minimal fan. Text work. I mean, we've had people, you know, that we've co-hosted on Oscilloscope that make text work, and I end up gushing over it because I'm just that style.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so there's all these visual elements that I could bring in that maybe in other pieces I haven't had the opportunity to, and yeah, they definitely touch on, you know, I'm painting in a sound piece, you know, I'm drawing with a black marker in a sound piece. Like it touches very much on the other work I do, graphic novels, story writing, all that sort of other stuff. It subtly, and again, you know me well enough, Ed, that you can see that connection. I think if you didn't know me, you could still know that this person has a connection with painting and drawing because he's put them in his work.
Clearly, because he's painting and drawing, yeah.
Right. So yeah, no, I definitely think like this piece is, and then again, I don't want to blow my own horn too much, but it feels like many things I've done over 8 or 9 years came together in this piece, and all sit well. Whereas they may have sat beside each other before, but maybe a little bit friction. They sit very well with each other in this piece. And again, I attribute that to, I made it in 4 days. It has nothing to do with having the time to make something. It literally has to do with the time to think about something. And I've just given myself a lot of time with this piece to think about what it would mean and how would I put it together. And hopefully that comes across like when you watch it. Yeah.
I'd say so. I would certainly say as well that for me personally, it's actually, whether it was just was half asleep the first time I listened to it, is really quite a grower. And it felt really quite intense the first time. And this sort of almost like being hit by this wall of stuff. But then actually once you delved into it, it was really quite meditative and quite almost the opposite of my first impression, which was really quite rewarding.
And honestly, if we could run a seminar for how to enjoy sound art for people who've never really figured it out, that's what you just have to spend time with things sometimes.
Yeah. And it's that sort of relaxing into stuff, I think, as well, that very much it's quite possible to start listening to something and trying to find meaning, trying to latch on to things and watching. Especially with this, there's just, if you look at it on a fine detail, there's just so much information, so many channels of it going on all at once that it's almost impossible to try and hold that in your head altogether.
So that's great. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to quickly say that when I was trying to level that out, like the sounds, I would lose sounds. And it was like, there's got to be, I'm sure there's a scientific phenomenon that, like, I'd hear it. I'd be, okay, so that pen is making, that pen is doing that sound. And then as other things came in and frequencies overtook it, I'd be like, where is it? And I double check and make sure that I didn't, duck it down in my, and it would just disappear and then come back again. And that's sort of organic composition with all that sort of wild, so much put into it. Like you say, there's so many channels of things. Is kind of like that's the kind of gold, the nugget for me, is that experience where you're just like, even me, I'm like, how did this composition come this way? So
I mean, that was something that initially I was wondering about, as posing as one of the questions for this, as along the lines of, firstly, how did you hold all of that in your head? Which I think by the sound of it, you probably didn't. But also, actually, how did you physically manage that much or that many streams of data? How did you put it together as a piece within the computer? You mentioned something about sort of blocks of Lego. Is that within, I don't know, Premiere or something?
I'd love to say Premiere, but I'm using Olive.
Right.
I used Olive. Now, I'll quickly just give a little shout out to Olive. Olive is free. Olive is a very good video editing software for free, which of course Adobe isn't. I love Adobe, but it's not for free. Now, this project was too big for Olive, and I'm very fortunate to get a copy rendered out. I rendered out several other copies, and they just didn't work. Now it's a free program, and I'm very much, I love free stuff. Who doesn't love free stuff? Please go use Olive for free. It's awesome. Try not to make your 20, 40 layer compositions with Olive. Try it. Maybe you want a bit more robust. But it worked. Okay, so it worked. And that's sort of the other half of my practice, which is a bit of like, the MacGyver of it all. Which is like, oh crap, like I'm doing stuff probably not the best practice way. Did it work? Did I get something out of it? Okay, great. Let's just ignore how we got there. Never look at that file again, and we just take our nice pristine video. So yeah, it certainly I would have saved time with better software. And I think that's hands down for anyone who's doing this stuff, visual, audio. There's lots of free stuff. It works great. If you can afford better stuff, it probably will work better. It just tends to be that way. But yeah, like definitely. So that's sort of like we talk about the chaos composition. I don't know if it's a real thing or not. It's just how I call it. But like literally, yeah. So
it's there. It's documented. It's here. We're talking about it. It's real. It's got its own entity out there now.
Awesome. Let's TM it. So you got your drum layer. Let's call this the drum layer, and it's maybe, I don't know, 4 seconds. The second drum layer is 8 seconds, and I put it here. The next layer is 5 seconds, and it's going to go, here. And that's literally the way it starts to Lego stack, because those lengths are not equal. So they start.
So are we talking video lengths or audio lengths or both? Or
both are completely in loop with each other in this particular piece because the synchronicity, right? So so the video, each channel, I like that word. So each channel, each object that we see has a looped video and audio that's the same length. However, each channel doesn't have the same length of loop. So they vary from 20 seconds to 2 seconds. And then each channel wasn't set up so that they're all in line. They're literally, you see that watching it, they come in pieces. Which is why, in a way, I like that sort of middle section before the electronic rhythm section comes in, because that's sort of the opportunity to listen to all those different channels compose themselves, because I didn't intentionally say I want the drum here, I want the flutes here, I was like, no, this is a line of loops. Okay, here's the next line of loops. Okay, here's the next line of loops, and it's composed like that. And that's why you can listen to something. For me, anyway, that's how I can tolerate something 4 minutes of looped material, because those loops aren't all looped together. It's the disorganization of that makes it interesting. That gives it that sense of evolution, even though it's not really changing at all, right?
So how much of that are you riding faders and things to balance that within what's going on? Or are you literally setting up this sort of kind of phase piece almost and letting it run?
Absolutely the latter.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I said, like there starts with pure, I would say 90% authenticity sample of the drum, because and then moving and nothing's really authentic anyway, Ed. So it's
okay.
100%. And then we move away to, so as I would compose each loop was composed and then placed immediately. So it wasn't like I made 20 loops. So I would make the loop and I would adjust the noise. And as I went along further, I was just taking noises from free sounds, because you can get Creative Commons noises. You don't need to attribute anyone, and there's great samples. So Free Sounds is another great site. Pull off those and stick them in, and just making sure again that everybody had a little bit of space to hear. Making sure every free. But then there's no. That's the key. Is that there's no, when you get to that, when all 20 channels are there, I'm hands off. I feel like the composition is in charge, is in the organization of those loops. And so they're just running, and I'm not fading in and out. There's no trickery there. If you hear something, it disappears. That's because the frequencies of a different loop has now overcome it. But because their loops are the same length, you're going to hear that original noise again somewhere else, because the frequency, a lot of the loops had gaps in them. That's a little bit of a trick, right? Is to not have continuous loops, so that when the gap appears, we can hear those other channels, something from those other 20 objects. So it's very much like like a Lego built structure that once it's built will play its own sound for me. And like I said, there is an original sound that when I was sitting here going, okay, ding, 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 it was being captured, and I had it on my looper pedal for 30 seconds. So I was on internal loop on a soundtrack that doesn't exist. That's the authenticity. That's the authenticity that I had to then translate into the piece.
Oh, that's really, really interesting as a sort of way of constructing, in a sense. Which, it's a very kind of focused and kind of historical kind of way of doing things, in a sense. I mean, and has all of these sort of parallels with different ways of working and the minimalism that we said. But I mean, what struck me watching it this morning was also along the lines of when people talk about electronic music and experimentation, I mean, normally what sort of springs to mind is possibly some slightly grumpy dude with a laptop under his arm with a copy of Ableton on it, you know. And this is a long way from that. And I was just wondering kind of what led you to that point, because it's obviously well within the brief, but it's so almost a sort of real world acoustic composition thing that's facilitated through what you're doing. So I'm just sort of intrigued, because there's obviously a lot of real world practice that's informing what you're doing. And
yeah. I think it's a fair question. Like,
good. I don't actually manage to articulate that as a question. I was starting to wonder.
Well, I think I get my answer right.
Give an answer, even if I haven't gotten the question.
Yeah. Sorry. Say the question again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was more along the lines of it's not stereotypical electronic music. What got you to that point?
You know, it's funny because, like, the reason I say it's fair is, like, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, it's a bit of a reaction to Oscilloscope. It's to the community I'm in, and this is why I've been so I'm so gushy about it. I love Oscilloscope so much because I have access to other creators in this genre, and I think part of me watching Oscilloscope, there's a part of me that sort of was like, well, you know, there's a lot of great material that comes out of here, but it does lean a little bit onto the electronic and to the software heavy stuff. And I was like, you know, in my mind, I was like, there's this part too of like the acoustic and the authentic and the sound field recordings. There's, you know, well, field recording in this, you know, like that's so traditional sound art. You can't get more traditional. And I sort of wanted to sort of share those parts with Oscilloscope a little more, because that's ultimately part of my practice, is those parts as well. I think, you know, certainly when I worked with Charles, you know, I would be more apt to bring in something acoustic or something less electronic based, and he would be definitely more, he'd program his own instrument that he made out of, you know, wires, you know. So like we definitely had that balance, and I sort of was, you know, my experience with Oscilloscope has been so rewarding and so great. I sort of wanted to share that part of sound with Oscilloscope, and you know, and it really is intentional like that. Like
that is actually really nice. I like that answer, and it's something that I've been thinking as well, and actually to find that is a reasoned and thought through product of that is wonderful. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, have you got anything to sort of add about your piece that you feel I've overlooked? Because I'm sure, I mean, there's bound to be things that I haven't asked about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, I honestly think we've had a really great discussion today about this piece. You know, like we went into things that, and I'm not one to, I don't want to give everything away too, because, you know, it's nice when people find their own things inside it,
absolutely.
Right? But yeah, no, I think we've explored this piece quite a bit. I think, you know, certainly like it's the intent of this show Deep Dive to get deep into this piece. And you know, I haven't told you about my family history. I mean, that would be the next step. We're so into the personal life now. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I really feel we've opened up this piece. Certainly, if you know, are curious about more of my work, I have work on my website, Reverend Tate. I also have work on Host Operator with Charles, and I also have a project, Double Beta. So there's all kinds of ways on the internet you can sort of, if you like my ideas of authenticity, or if you're interested in more of Charles and I's work on like live performance, performative state, all that kind of stuff, it's there. I implore you to go and dig around and enjoy that stuff. As far as this kind of work, I think, you know, in the future, I definitely, as long as Oscilloscope will have me, I think I'll definitely be proceeding in a similar way. I like sort of trumpeting a little bit of the acoustic, or certainly it helps that I've gotten a very good mic, and you know, that helps a bit too. But yeah, like I think this piece, I'm again very much born out of who I am, but also born out of my relationship with Oscilloscope, and I couldn't be more happy for that. So thanks very much.
That's really cool. So yeah, thank you very, very much. Quick couple of ones before we do wrap up. if you have enjoyed this, then please do go and, if you have a few coins, put them in, buy us a coffee at coffee.com. I don't know if we're able to have this going on the screen at the bottom. We may do. If not, it's coffee.com/oscilloscope. And if you don't have any money to chip towards it, or you've done so before or whatever, just give us a like or any of those sorts of things, or share it to somebody. That'd be lovely, because that also helps. And plus, it means we all kind of feel warm and fuzzy on the inside, which is really nice. The next normal, in inverted commas, oscilloscope will be on March the 30th. If I believe there are still a couple of performance slots for it, so if you want to come and join us for that, then please do get in touch, either as a performer or indeed as a member of audience. The next deep dive, providing we're all still sane, will be on April the 15th with me and Ben co-hosting, and a special guest. I'm not going to say who it is because we haven't recorded it yet, but oh my goodness, is it going to be worth it, you know? So that will be fantastic. Thank you very, very much to Charles for teching and being the person behind in the background who's sorting us all out and keeping us roughly on track, and to Rob for doing idents and things for us, and everybody's friends and family for letting us have the space to kind of go off on these wonderful tangents. So yeah, thank you very, very much, Ben, and congratulations on a wonderful piece.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
It's thoroughly enjoyable, and hopefully everybody can join us again. And well done to you. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.